opens the Committee of Conference on House Bill 187, an act relative to the emergency powers of the Commissioner of Health and Human Services and relative to the membership of the Oversight Committee on Health and Human Services. And I think we know that there's only 2 spots of disagreement. The rest of it is pretty easy. If you've got your side by side, it's lots of blank spaces. So if you would turn please to page 9. This has to do with the Oversight Committee, which I chair, and my immediate predecessor is to my left. And the only change that I see is that line 7, when it came out of the House, it asked for 2 members of the Senate, and the Senate amended it to 3.
Lots of interest. We are interested.
Senator Sherman.
Well, 2 is actually the original number was 3, and it was dropped to 2 in statute. I think it was last year.
Yeah, and
So I think this was partially at the request of the department, partially at the request of the Senate, because if you put 3 on, you might get 1. It's just an attendance issue, so it would be great to.
And I think when we were talking, you and I, Mr. Chairman, about drafting in the House, I simply said I never had 3 ever. So perhaps we could just put it at 2 because I was concerned about issues of the quorum. But I'm no longer concerned about issues of the quorum because the House can appoint alternates. And if the House has alternates, I can get 5 people, or you can get 5 people into the room. And that means that we can, to the limited extent, the committee votes on anything. So I think that going back to 3, if the Senate prefers it that way, makes sense to me.
House side, I'm good with this.
Yeah.
Okay,
No objections.
The only thing, if I could,
please.
the only thing I'd ask Jim is whether there's a desire on the Senate side to have the alternate, the ability to appoint alternates. But I would have thought that the
We
president
don't.
already can.
We don't normally do that. What we normally do is that if someone can't attend, then the Senate president will appoint a temporary replacement, for that day. And then,
Right.
so
That's what I
the
thought.
Senate office usually takes care of it.
Would that be considered legitimate even though it is not going into the law here?
Well, the thing is that Senate president is the person who gets to choose who the representatives are.
Right.
And as long as he signs it and says, for this day, that's my representative.
Okay.
It meets fully the law.
All right, we had a senator missing last Friday and no replacement had been named. So that just simply means the Senate members of oversight would be reviewed in this procedure.
Well, what your last Friday thing is that either the senator that was supposed to be there didn't notify the Senate president's office, or there wasn't sufficient things on the agenda that the Senate president thought it was necessary to, put a replacement in for that particular day. It could be a complicated thing that you're going over, and a new replacement really wouldn't have the background. So, why would you do that? There's any number of reasons.
I think this had to do, in fact, it had to do with an airline ticket that suddenly got moved up from 4 in the afternoon to 10 in the morning. And I think that is the reason
Yeah,
for
could be.
it.
And if there isn't sufficient time to do it, then certainly the Senate president can't do it.
Sure, Senator Sherman.
Page
Yes.
9, discussing
So the only-
2 and 3.
It might be helpful to remind the senators who are on the committee that that's an opportunity.
All right, let me note this.
So if they let the Senate president know that they can't be there for whatever reason, then the Senate president can appoint a temporary replacement.
The fiscal committee is an example of where we do that often. And depending upon the content of the meeting, if there is someone maybe we just want to substitute one senator for another because of that content. Okay, or if there is somebody absent, that the Senate President will take care of.
Well,
And I would just note that Senate practice and precedent, and if it works for them.
works for me, works for you, I'm
Probably,
sure.
and we have so few votes on this committee that it,
You never know when Jeff is gonna go take a walk, so, you know.
Blame me. I love it.
Now, the other item that involves a change will be on page 4 over to page 5 in my side-by-side. If you do not have a side-by-side, it's Roman numeral 8.
You're welcome to share one.
Thank you.
And this has to do with any permission for the Oversight Committee and or legislature to stop an emergency order given by the commissioner. And, you know, for the record, I'm a Laurie Shibonette groupie. We've worked on several things largely about issues relating to churches. And it was a joy and a pleasure to work for her, or work with her. Maybe that was a slip, but work with her. So anything going in here is certainly not about the person of the commissioner, but about duties of this and subsequent commissioners. The feeling we had in Health and Human Services Committee, and then this bill went to EDA, which the representative is from, was that we, the legislature, or members of the legislature, are a co-equal body to the executive branch with its departments. And secondly, as many of us understand emergency orders, especially the ones after 9/11, they are for short-term emergencies. They're for blizzards or tornadoes or riots or things like that. I don't believe that they were conceived for pandemics. Also, as we saw the pandemic coming through, things changed. And, well, married to a physician, I understand how when you say follow the science, sometimes the response is as of which day or according to whom. And we saw that, which in my mind didn't make anybody venal. It just simply said what might be given as an edict and proves to be true. It might be a group of citizen legislators who have a different opinion and they prove to be true. So we want some vehicle whereby we can say, we will review certain emergency orders. And let me say that I see this also, and perhaps especially as a safety valve, because we have people for whom they don't want anybody to have orders over them. Hell no, I ain't gonna do what you tell me to do. Some of these people sit in the legislature. And to be able to know that with a very high threshold, perhaps an emergency order might be canceled out. We were talking earlier, I wouldn't ever likely see it happen, but I think it has to be here to calm some people down. And so for that reason, there's other reasons too. Our leadership, Republican House leadership, wants a vehicle whereby an emergency order of the commissioner can be rescinded. And that's really going to be the sticky spot here. So that's my little intro spiel. Open to anybody else?
For myself, I would just say noted, and we probably, the three of us probably would want to get together and talk about your proposal.
Representative Weber made a great point, if you would not mind sharing it, about how it came out of our committee.
the other thing that we were, just as you arrived, we were trying to track how this has progressed through the House because it went to two separate committees. And we were remembering a provision that required a 2/3 majority to override any kind of decision of the commissioner.
Two-thirds of oversight.
Oh, I was thinking of a 2/3 of the House.
It was
but
two-thirds of
It was
oversight.
2/3 of
I will
oversight.
double check that. In
So-
the original document, it is of the committee.
Okay, so, but here's my suggestion for you to think about if you want to take some time and think about it is, first of all, think about supermajorities, both in the committee and potentially in the House. And secondly, think about a period of time that might be shorter and more comfortable to people so that we are not just leaving a 90-day hiatus. So those are two things that I thought might be subject to discussion. The other thing that is interesting with this is that, of course, if the House is bent on doing this, the legislature, not just the House, but the legislature, far easier in the Senate than the House, actually. The legislature can simply convene itself and do whatever they want.
Mhm.
That's item number one. So if there's a significant sentiment, this is the wrong direction, the legislature can take care of that. The other thing is that the commissioner can simply ask the governor to do it by emergency order, and then we're in a different part of the statutory scheme. So I throw all of that out.
Senator Sherman.
Just my objection to this was that when the commissioner would act, I mean, we're not talking about any specific action that may have occurred during COVID, but what we saw with COVID was, especially in the very early phase of COVID, as you said, the science was being built, it wasn't quite there. And so what the decisions that were being made were based on the latest available science, but also turning to the expertise of people like Ben Chan and Beth Daly and Lisa Morris, all of whom are specialists, not just in healthcare. Ben is the state epidemiologist, but also in public health.
Mhm.
And the success of our response to COVID really was the commissioner turning to expertise in how do we manage a pandemic
Mhm.
from a healthcare standpoint. And then very rapidly, they created CEDMAC, which was the Crisis Standards of Care Committee. I sat on that, and I've never sat on a panel in New Hampshire with more expertise,
Mhm.
whether it was nursing home experts to
Mhm.
child experts, pediatricians. And that was the body that was making recommendations
Mhm.
starting, I think we started in May or June. What really concerns me about this is that you have this body of experts under the commissioner, under the governor, in the executive branch. And then you have a small body of legislators who can shut that down. If I read this correctly, if I read this correctly, for 90 days with no definite oversight, they can just tell her no. And, or him, depending on who the commissioner is. So I am very concerned about, in the middle of some kind of crisis, which is where the word emergency is involved, we have a legislative body potentially with no expertise being able to say no. And the analogy I would give is the person who presents to the emergency room with chest pain.
Mhm.
And you have a cardiologist called in and he says, we need to go to the cath lab. Then you call up the president of the hospital who has no expertise, but is involved because he's the president of the hospital. He says, sorry, I don't agree.
Right.
And until then, so I'm just worried, if I could just finish, Jim. So I worry about the ability to completely block the action or what's felt to be the necessary response, a nimble, science-based response on the part of the commission.
All right,
Thank you,
being the
Senator.
first name senator on this one,
Yes, sir.
I want to shut this one down. It is clear to me that our position is we prefer the Senate position. If you want us to consider other language, it's probably not the language that's in your bill right now.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that we have time to get through all of your concerns before 9:30 because many of us have other meetings to attend. So
So we could
please
go to
consider
our,
the Senate language and whatever else you have.
If I could just add this too, I mean, this is going along at the same time as House Bill 417, which is the governor's policy. So I would like to think that a resolution of 417 would make this a lot easier.
Mhm.
That committee or conference meets at 11. Let's see what happens. So maybe we should come back tomorrow.
maybe, Representative?
Can I interject with the EDNA philosophy
Sure.
as to what's going on here before I as well have to leave at 9:30? To your point, Senator, in the discussion of the public health officials, it's my understanding that the state of New Hampshire did no primary research on COVID. So they were taking cues from a higher level. So as far as their response to that within the state of New Hampshire, sure. But the science that's driving that response was not primarily done in New Hampshire. So there's a little bit of them following the direction and opinions of, say, the CDC or a national science opinion on that. But secondly, to your point with this, the EDNA's concern is that, and I'm glad you brought up the 417 and the governor, whereas the concept of having a check on the governor's ability to, as far as the governor's emergency orders, the concern here is that the Health and Human Services Commissioner, which is in most people's, or in some people's view, a bureaucrat, would then now have power that is actually greater than the governor, with no ability to check on the Health and Human Services Commissioner. And there is concern that if the governor does have restrictions and the legislature does have the ability to check the governor's emergency orders, that a governor would then just use the Health and Human Services Commissioner to enact an emergency order that has less ability to be rescinded and just use that as a vessel to get what they want.
Let me,
Well, if I could just answer
Go ahead.
that. I think having been in this building a long time, most HHS commissioners answer to the governor. So I think in most circumstances, your concern would not be significant. But again, I think for purposes of 187, we'd be best advised to see what happens with 417. And then if there's an agreement on 417, then potentially that kind of agreement could be reflected in 187. That's all I'm trying to
that sounds reasonable. I was asked, I was not on the economic task force that gave guidance, but I was asked by that group to speak to DHHS on behalf of churches, having been an Episcopal priest for 47 years, as well as a legislator for 5. And there were several occasions where they called me, they asked. There was one occasion when I called someone and I said, this isn't going to stand. Yeah, but that's the order. I said, it is not going to stand because it is treating churches in a manner that is different from other similar organizations and has been adjudicated 7 times and the church has won 6 out of 7. Oh, well, it will take us 7 or 8 days to work this through the system. I said, we have a situation brewing right now. They called back and said, thank you, Representative Pearson, we accede. So there are times when somebody who isn't a medical expert can speak to an emergency order and prevail. And I'm glad it was done on that day. I diffused a lawsuit is what I wound up doing because there were people ready to bring it and they would have won it. So just for the record, there may need to be some vehicle where others outside of the silo farm can speak and speak with a reasonable amount of intelligence. Senator,
And Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
if I may, I think when we recess, we need to recess to a time certain so that
okay.
the clerk's offices in both houses can be noticed.
Senator, when do you propose we recess to?
I'm free after the ceremony for the tax credit things tomorrow, probably 10:30 or so tomorrow morning.
I can do tomorrow morning. I have to be physically somewhere else. I would have to be done by 11:30, I think.
Well, how many more of these items?
This is it.
That's it?
Yeah, everything else is
Okay,
happy.
so you're, okay.
And you said 417 is being looked at today,
11.
11 o'clock, okay.
So
I could also do this
I'm on the
afternoon if that's
HB2
helpful.
media conference that's tentatively slated for 10. I don't have to be here tomorrow morning, I think.
I have a 10 o'clock Zoom.
How about Wednesday?
Wednesday is a disaster for me, but
I could do 9 o'clock tomorrow. morning.
9 o'clock tomorrow?
The awards are.
No, yes?
9 o'clock is when the ceremony for the awards are.
And I already have another one at night.
How about 11?
11 would work for me.
I can do 11 briefly and
Was there a problem at 10:30?
Um,
I mean, how long will the awards take?
It shouldn't take but an hour. That's what they normally take when they're held here.
10:30 would be great for me.
10:30 is fine.
10:30? And Senator,
I'll be here if I can.
okay,
That's on HB2.
this will give us a chance to find some language that is happy for all of us, I hope. All good? Christina, is there a room, maybe at 10:30 tomorrow, to your knowledge? Check with leadership. Okay, good. So we go into recess then. Thank you.
Thank you very much.